It's time to explore the world according to Glenn. I'm Kevin Jacobsen. Glenn Close is my favorite actress, and this show is all about exploring the career of one of the finest actors of her generation. Each episode, I'll be joined by a guest as we dive into one of Glenn's movies, TV shows, or stage productions, going chronologically through her career, discussing her performance, and assessing the project itself. And today, we are talking Glenn's Oscar-nominated performance in Hillbilly Elegy.
Time nominee Glenn Close, motherfuckers.
My guest today is always a joy to talk with about movies, I should say. She's joined me on numerous podcasts over the years, including For the World According to Glenn, where we covered the Sarah Plain and Tall trilogy. Her perspectives can be found at The Watch and Talk, Citizen Dame, and Awards Watch. Welcome back, a certified good Terminator, Karen Peterson.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Hey. I have a mix of emotions, as we talked about earlier, because we're here to talk about a movie that people certainly have feelings on, as I do, and I'm sure you do. And it could go in any direction, really, how we go with this. But I'm very intrigued to see where this goes.
Yeah.
But before we talk Glenn and Hillbilly Elegy, you told me on your first episode about your relationship to Glenn Close, and you also, on your second episode, gave me your casting idea for a future Glenn role, which was as a leader of a heist movie, which I need that to happen still. Such a fun idea. So fun. Love it. But now I'll ask you an alternative question, which is, if you could recast Glenn in any Oscar-nominated Best Actress role, what would it be and why?
So I have to say, when you first asked me that question, I thought, ooh, that's so fun. And then I went, oh, that's so hard.
Yes,
because,
that's the point.
and I love it. And I went through every Best Actress race. And unfortunately, unlike you, I have not seen every Best Actress performance. I have not seen all of the films.
You don't have my sickness.
I don't.
It's okay.
Or your, I don't know, stamina drive.
Yeah, I guess. That's very nice of you to say.
But then I thought, okay, the easiest way to answer that is, what's a performance I didn't love that I would just like swap in Glenn Close instead, and it would be better. So I was going to go that route. And then I decided to challenge myself a little bit more and say, what's a great performance that I would love to see Glenn Close? I would love to see what she would do with it. So I actually think it'd be really fun to see her as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, that's very smart.
I mean, obviously, I would not take away a nomination from someone so deserving, but I think it would be really fun to see what Glenn would do with that role.
Yeah. I feel like that is something that she easily could have done if she were around in the 70s and kind of like a little bit older than she would have been in the 70s, but if One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was coming out in the 80s or 90s, I think she would be like at the top of the list to play Nurse Ratched.
Yeah.
So, because we also know she is not afraid of kind of being disliked by the audience and, going up against some men. And so
like just watching her be this foil to Jack Nicholson in that type of a role would be just delicious.
Yes. They would later be in Mars Attacks together. So that's a fun connection there too. But yeah, she would have won an Oscar for it. We know this. Like that would have been just her bread and butter right there. So yeah, great choice. Well
thank
done.
you.
Well, here we go. There is so much to discuss with what we're here to talk about today, but first I did just want to note we are now in the 2020s with Glenn. We have already reached the current decade. I can't believe it's gone by so fast, but going to be fascinating as we start to close out this podcast, the variety of roles that Glenn takes and is provided. But yes, it's time to discuss Hillbilly Elegy, the story of our current Vice President, JD Vance. Sometimes I really have to stop and consider how wild it is that is our current political landscape, but yes, Hillbilly Elegy began with a best-selling memoir by JD Vance, published in 2016, and in it, JD discusses his upbringing in Middletown, Ohio, and how he had a kind of unstable childhood because of his family situation. His single mother, Bev, was severely addicted to drugs and struggled to keep her job. So Bev's mother and JD's grandmother, Bonnie, who he calls Mama, was a sort of stabilizing force for him growing up and helped him eventually go on the path to joining the Marines and then going to college at Yale. So the book Hillbilly Elegy was a huge bestseller, especially amid the 2016 presidential election, as there was a lot of interest, especially by the media, in sort of trying to understand the rise of Donald Trump and the plight of the white working class. And this was thought to kind of contextualize that. And because of JD kind of expanding upon his life story to sort of provide like a rationale for the swing to the right among lower income white communities in rural areas, it was a huge hit with conservatives and helped to prop him up as a kind of leading voice in that movement. We may talk later about his career in the 2020s later on, but just to, for now, keep it to Hillbilly Elegy. So Imagine Entertainment got the film rights to the book in 2017, so just a year after it was published, with Ron Howard attached to direct. The president of Imagine Entertainment said at the time, quote, "Hillbilly Elegy is a powerful, true coming-of-age memoir by JD Vance. Through the lens of a colorful, chaotic family and with remarkable compassion and self-awareness, JD has been able to look back on his own upbringing as a hillbilly to illuminate the plight of America's white working class, speaking directly to the turmoil of our current political climate." End quote. And Vanessa Taylor was attached to write the adaptation, having just come off writing The Shape of Water with Guillermo del Toro. Netflix then purchased the rights to distribute the film for $45 million, which is just an astonishing number, especially for a movie this small scale. But Glenn was cast to play Mama, JD's grandmother, in April of 2019, just a few months after those infamous Oscars that we discussed last week. Ron Howard went to see Glenn in a play in New York, and sort of based on the timing, this would have been either her reprising her role in Sunset Boulevard or possibly the play she did in 2018 called Mother of the Maid. Probably the latter if I'd had to guess, but she and Ron Howard had stayed friendly over the years ever since they worked together on his film The Paper in 1994. And she has mentioned to him that she knew he was working on Hillbilly Elegy and said she had read the book and was fascinated by it and said she felt like she could play this role of Mama, and Ron agreed. And the other big name was Amy Adams to play Bev. Amy was apparently a bit reluctant at first and wanted some things adjusted in the script before signing on. And then Gabriel Basso was cast to play JD, with Owen Astelos as a younger JD growing up in Ohio. So Hillbilly Elegy centers on JD Vance, bouncing back and forth between him as a 27-year-old law student at Yale in 2011 and him growing up as a 13-year-old in the late 90s. We see how he and his mother Bev, his mama, and his sister Lindsay, played by Haley Bennett, move from Kentucky to Middletown, Ohio, where Bev struggles with drug addiction and tries to provide for the family by working as a nurse, but she's fired after stealing drugs at the hospital. So JD spends a lot of time being raised by Mama, who's a very no-nonsense, salt-of-the-earth kind of woman who doles out life lessons and hopes to set JD on the right path and help him break the cycle of abuse in their family. Meanwhile, in the 2011 storyline, JD is hoping to land an internship in Washington, D.C., but has to take care of his family after his mother relapses. And the film is kind of about JD trying to pull himself up by his bootstraps to make something of his life. So, with all that said, Karen, let's do this. Hillbilly Elegy. This is a movie that takes on a new meaning now, I would say, watching it 6 years later, but I would love to know if you have a history with Hillbilly Elegy before it was a movie, and your thoughts on if you can remember how it felt in 2020 watching this, how things changed now, and most importantly, your thoughts on Glenn. I hope you kept track of all those questions.
I think I did.
Okay.
So, first of all, I will say I did not read the book. In 2016, I vaguely knew who JD Vance was, barely.
Yeah.
It was, and that's the thing when you talk about our current landscape, and he's now the vice president of the United States. Like 8 years ago, I knew his name. I didn't know much about him at all, and now here we are. But yeah, so with the movie, I remember this was one that definitely had a lot of Oscar buzz, especially with Ron Howard being attached and Glenn Close and Amy Adams, and it was expected to, in all of the early predictions, it was expected to do very well. So the anticipation preceded that film. And then when it hit, I remember seeing it at my house because this would have been like around COVID time.
Mhm.
And I just thought, this is it. Like, this is, I don't know. People were like, some people were super excited about it. It was definitely a film where the audience and the critics were like the regular audience and the critics were just not on the same page about it. And I just couldn't understand why people were so enthusiastic. I just thought this is actually, it's kind of boring. It's not visually that interesting. It's the storytelling. It just feels like a series of vignettes that are very, very loosely connected together. It just didn't feel like a great film. And I know Ron Howard's had kind of a interesting career and not all of his films are hits, but going into this, I was expecting this to be more like one of his great films, and then it was not. And if you want to do something really fun, go through Rotten Tomatoes and look at some of the critic reviews from the time and see who praised this movie back then. And I think some of
Ooh.
them probably would feel much differently now. Just a fun little side
Oh,
note.
I may do that exercise after we're done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And get
pretty
back to
funny.
you. Yeah.
It's pretty funny. But yeah, no, so yeah, my initial thoughts on it were just it's fine. It didn't, I didn't think it was terrible. I just did not understand the hoopla around it, and I just didn't think that it was very good.
Hmm.
Glenn at the time, and I don't know, I feel like rewatching it this time I've shifted a little bit, because at the time I really felt like she's just playing a caricature. And on this rewatch, I did see more depth and nuance to her performance because I was specifically looking for it the first time I watched it. And I've
Sure.
only now seen it twice. And I will
You're welcome.
probably not watch it again. I
You
can't
never
imagine
know.
that I would, but yeah, stranger things have happened. But yeah, the first time I watched it, I was just watching the overall movie, and I just didn't really see a lot from her as far as
Right.
just anything beyond some quippy sound bites and a
Hmm.
crazy wig. But this time I did see more to her, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah,
Yeah.
overall, I can see why and how quickly the buzz faded from this film and its Oscar chances.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I agree. I mean, I feel like even when Glenn was attached in 2019, I was intrigued and excited to see her getting like a juicy role in general, and felt like we were already seeing a bit of a career bump of, the wife kind of helping to give her a little bit more prominence again. But I also felt a tad bit of apprehension at just like what the approach was going to be with this, because honestly, I think there is a way to do this story like this. And even if I might not agree with like JD Vance's politics or whatever, or the way he talks about poor or disadvantaged people, there could be a perspective here that is well thought out about what makes people, especially in this, white working class and people on the poverty line, feel kind of abandoned by their leaders or feel the economic anxiety, which was a big phrase at the time, and how some people kind of surmised like that Donald Trump and Republicans who kind of aligned with him like felt kind of like him kind of validating the anger of those folks who felt betrayed or ignored by or like alienated by those bigger institutions and Democrats or whatever. And there are also many flaws in what JD Vance was arguing in his book that have to do with, like, again, blaming the poor to some degree for not being motivated enough to pull themselves up by their bootstraps like he did, and kind of ignoring like the systemic issues in our country, and that makes people kind of remain there. But all of that could have made, I think, a compelling perspective, even if I don't agree with it. At least like it could have like the convictions of having a strong perspective, however dangerous some of those ideas may be. But the film kind of to your point, for the most part, fails to really engage with like anything beyond a surface level, and in some cases just like straight up ignores anything in favor of just like making what feels like a very apolitical family drama that's full of speeches and monologues and a generic story of like just overcoming the odds, but in a way that doesn't actually feel all that earned.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like this was labeled as, and the book is certainly presented as, this look at this particular region of America and why they see the world the way that they do and why they vote the way that they do or voted, well, still do, and
Mm-hmm.
the opioid epidemic, all of these different elements. But the film is not interested in any of that. It only focuses on JD and his relationship to his sister, his mother, and his grandmother, and also being kind of torn between his family and his new life in, at Yale with his girlfriend Usha. So basically just being torn in different directions by the women in his life. And it's not
Right.
interested in really engaging with where he came from or the circumstances. Like it blames his mother for
Mm-hmm.
her drug addictions. She had access because she's a nurse, but it doesn't really talk about the culture that they're living in and the fact that this is prevalent. This is something that a lot of people are experiencing. There's just no real sense of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even just narratively, I think like the structure, I think is deeply flawed, to be honest. Like, I think the script is kind of a disaster, if we're being honest, because even on a direction level, I think it also doesn't really feel like Ron Howard doesn't have like a super strong handle on how to craft this story in a authentic way or really go there. Like, it is so glossy and polished, even when it's centering on these like gritty salt of the earth characters, and it just feels kind of like a mismatch, I would say. I think of what other directors could have done with this material. Even I thought of like a Deborah Granick, for example, like
Oh,
after
yeah.
seeing Winter's Bone and Leave No Trace, like she's very good and has a strong point of view about working class people.
I think that's actually really brilliant because she's also able to show that world without being judgmental about it. And I think
Exactly.
that's the tricky thing that Ron Howard probably really grappled with is how do I show the truth without being too judgy? And he
Hmm.
he probably really had a hard time figuring out how to, well, clearly had a hard time figuring out how
Yeah.
to do that. So his answer was just not to do it.
I mean, especially it's tricky because the sort of foundation of it is JD Vance being rather judgy about these people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to work with
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
and not
Very
have it
true.
feel like that. Yeah. And so instead we just get a lot of, I think, cliches of Appalachian people, and feels like actors kind of cosplaying as underprivileged people in a way that can sort of give Hollywood a bad name sometimes. And so I feel like, and I'm sure Ron Howard might argue with me on this, but I feel like if you're examining this specific story on some level, you should have to engage with some of that baggage that comes with it and the sort of cultural political debate that this book caused. And just not engaging with it at all feels kind of cowardly to me, because like I do think there is a way to approach this, even for someone of different political beliefs. Like Ron Howard would definitely differ from JD Vance. Like there's a way to present the story and really dive into the systemic issues that affect people across the political spectrum, and even engage with how JD is an exception and how he was able to break the cycle, but also explore like even how JD might feel about that of being an exception. And the film just like doesn't tap into any of that potential, which just makes it feel hollow.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I wonder is because, I mean, JD Vance is a producer on this film too, or executive producer.
Yeah.
And so he's involved in it. And that's one of the tricky things is when a movie is about somebody and they are involved in that production, it's really rare that you get an honest portrayal.
Yeah.
And obviously he had greater ambitions and he wanted this movie
Mm,
to sort of put him into a different sphere for political purposes, which worked.
yeah.
And so yeah, so he wants it to look glossy. He wants to be the hero of his story.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that he doesn't have which we know, we see that on the news all the time. He doesn't have the ability to self-reflect. And it would have been really
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see a younger version of him actually reflecting on, gosh, I've been really judgmental about the people I grew up around, and I want to do something to go off and help them. I want to make something of myself to help, make my grandmother's sacrifice worth it, and to help my mom through her drug addiction. And, it just would have been a much more interesting and empathetic story if he had allowed engagement with his mistakes and his, I keep using the word judgmental, but that's the only thing
I
that's coming
mean,
to mind right now.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even beyond all that, too, I just think it's such a generic family drama that rarely even goes as gritty as the story needs to be. I think it's that lack of authenticity that really gets me. And I think it also weirdly feels like JD is kind of a cipher for a lot of the story, that I failed to really connect with him in any way. Maybe it's a performance thing too, but like the younger kid, even Gabriel Basso, I think rather lacking in screen presence, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's very tough as our window into the world. And I think Amy Adams is kind of struggling, to be honest, to find a way into her character without making her into a bit of a two-dimensional stereotype of like the out of control, drug addicted, traumatized by her childhood, and like stuck in this cycle that she'll never get out of kind of woman that just doesn't really suit her style as an actress. So it's playing against type, but like almost too much against type.
Yeah. Well, and this is another one of those areas where, as you mentioned, the screenplay
Yeah.
is a mess, and which is so strange because, yeah, Vanessa Taylor, she's talented. She won for
Mm-hmm.
The Shape of
Coming off an
Water.
Oscar nomination. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And she did Game of Thrones. Like, she's done all kinds of great work. And so
Yeah.
this is where it's just what happened here. But just I think that the problems with the script are most evident with Bev, with the Amy Adams character, because there's so many contradictions with her that just never get explored. Like, for example, when her father dies, and she's just absolutely heartbroken over this, and he was the only person who understood her, and he was her connection, to life, and now he's gone. And even Mama is really grieving over this, but then you find out randomly, it just gets dropped in, that one time he was super drunk and passed out on the couch at Christmas, and she lit him on, like, Mama lit him on fire, and he's like a
Yep.
drunk abuser. And it's like, wait, is
Mm-hmm.
this even the same person? I'm so confused what's happening here.
I
And then that's
know.
never talked about again.
I have to say, a lot of that specific flashback felt like a complete like addition late in the process to
Yeah.
be like, I can see where probably Amy Adams, even, I don't want to speak for what she thought could be revised in the script, but I could see her wanting it to be more about her being in that cycle of like violence and abuse in her life, and wanting to have those flashbacks to her childhood to show how this wasn't just like her being a screw up, that like, her family kind of did a number on her as a child, but then, yeah, it just kind of contradicts what we've previously seen. So
Right.
I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just one example, but this is the kind of thing that the film does over and over again. It just contradicts itself, and it doesn't really engage in some of the problems of growing up in this place. And even in the beginning, because JD's narrating his story too, and in the beginning he talks about, like, oh yeah, we moved to Middletown, Ohio when I was a kid, but home was always Kentucky. And it's like, okay, but why? He kind of references some magical summers there, but I don't really get the sense of why that place meant so much more to him than Ohio did, and why he was drawn to it, and what did that do for him, to him, as he grew up. I don't get any idea of that from as
Yeah.
the film goes on.
We get like a brief scene at the beginning of him like at the local watering hole, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and then almost
seems
getting
like a nice
drowned by
place, but
some jerk kids. It's like,
yeah. So I don't know why we're like idealizing that per
right?
se, but okay.
The best time of my life was when I was getting bullied.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not gonna yuck anyone's yum.
no.
But anyway, with Glenn, perhaps you could say it's bias, but I really do see her far and away as the MVP of the whole project, personally. I do think Mema as a character very easily could slip into caricature. And to your point, I think even when I first saw it as well, I felt like she's really going for something here. Like she's making some strong choices, and sometimes good, sometimes we're pushing it a little. But it is like that tough old broad from Appalachia, and that is like who she is through and through. But like, I do think, again, rewatching it, she is a three-dimensional person by the end, who we're seeing as someone who struggled a lot in her life, who did have apparently an abusive husband and wasn't able to give her daughter a good life, and maybe feels some lingering guilt over that. But she kind of feels this urge to like set things right for her family, especially with JD as the future of the family. Like she knows that, as she says that, as like she's the one person who can kind of keep things on the rails. And I think Glenn brings far more dimension to her role ultimately than anyone else here in showing the ideas. And you can feel like the history of this woman who has had to weather a lot of storms in her life, but that like she's still here and that they've all made her stronger. And I also think the accent works out surprisingly well for an actress who was born in Connecticut. I will say it's not always easy to just be slipping in that way. And I think there's just this overall sensibility that she, learned also from like looking at family home movies of Mama, just seeing her movements, how she sort of contorted her mouth sometimes and how she stood. Like it is very considered as a performance and thoughtful, and wanting to bring this woman's toughness and even her sense of humor to life and all those like guiding principles and everything. And I do think for the most part, she does do that.
Yeah. There are a couple of moments that particularly stood out for me.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is actually really subtle. She's literally in the background and blurred, but it's when she's busted out of the hospital because she's gonna go take care of things, which
Sure.
also weirdly it reminded me of one of the Fast and the Furious movies. I can't even remember which one now, but it's the one where The Rock breaks out of the hospital and he like busts open his own cast with his bicep. But anyway, it just reminded me of that. But
would have loved to see Mama do that.
Oh, totally. If anyone could, she could. But yeah, so when she gets to the house and she's like, I'm taking JD with me. He's getting in trouble and I'm going to take care of this. And so Bev is standing there and JD's like, yeah, I want to go. And Bev's like, no, she's crazy. And Mama's in the background just making the craziest face as she's watching this happen. And it's so funny. And it's like, it's not a funny scene, but she's just embodying exactly how she's being described. And she's not saying a word. She's just standing there kind of with her mouth half open. Her eyes just look like these dark, circles, and her hair's all frizzy and crazy. And it just was so perfect. And you can also still understand why JD's like, yeah, I'm gonna take my chances with the crazy lady over you right now. So I like that moment. And then also the one where it's a scene where Bev comes in and she needs JD to pee in the cup for her because she has to go take this drug test and to get her license. And Mama, understanding that like she's part of the reason her daughter is in this endless cycle and family is the most important thing. And she stops and she tells JD, you have to help your mother here. Like this is how we do things. And that I feel like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other scenes that we could talk about, like with the calculator and the, Meals on Wheels and stuff like that. But I think that scene where she just tells him, you need to help your mother. I know this isn't right, but this is what we do. There's just something really, I think that is one of the best connections we have to this world that they're living in. And it comes through Glenn's performance.
Yes, I'm very glad you mentioned this because I completely forgot about this scene. Like, there's a lot of scenes in this that I do, for better or for worse, stick in my mind when I think about the performance, like the good Terminator and the calculator and the, you gotta be somebody, all those kind of little witticisms. But it is those more subtle moments, as rare as they are in this movie, that did stick out for me on a rewatch. And that one in particular is like she kind of walks in and is like assessing who she's going to side with between the two of them. And it's like you can see her making the mental calculations on how to proceed with this, almost like she's like the tiebreaker in this argument. And she ultimately tells him, yeah, to just do it for his mother. And there's just this kind of heartbreaking look on Glenn's face as she's looking at, her daughter and her grandson. And she knows there's no easy solution here, but she's just like, whatever's for the greater good, in a sense, to just like give Bev one more chance to prove herself and show that she can like set things right. And yeah, it's one of those things where I think you do see the history of like being a mother and a grandmother who's always concerned about Bev and the very unfortunate path that her life took, and is so tired of worrying about her for so long, and you really see the worry on her face. But I think there's also too some guilt over what she feels was like responsible for giving her a rough childhood, as you said. So it's a nice nuanced sort of mix of emotions that we get in that scene that is not often prevalent in the rest of the movie.
Yeah. It also makes me wonder how somebody could be raised by a grandma like that or partially raised by a grandma like that, who's constantly giving her daughter chances and is someone who ends up being unwilling to give people multiple chances in life.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting contradiction that, again, I wish that he had not been involved with the making of this film, because it might have been something that could have been explored.
As you're saying this, it's also making me think of The Apprentice, the Sebastian Stan movie.
Yeah.
And how, Trump was not involved with that. And it's very apparent when you're watching it that he was not. And because it's not a very sanitized version by any means.
Yeah, definitely not flattering for sure.
No. But in a way, I don't know how you felt about that movie, but certainly a more interesting perspective than what we get here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I had concerns. Sorry, let's take the side note for a second. I did have some concerns with that film, because especially as I started watching it and you see, his relationship with his father, and I thought, wow, are we really going to go there where it's like, oh, look, poor him, but no, it very quickly becomes clear. And I think that film, and I don't think that it's a perfect movie by any stretch, but I do think that it does a lot better job of engaging with the fact that he had so many chances to be a good person and so many opportunities to make good choices. And every time he was confronted with one of those opportunities, he chose wrong. And I think that is a really good examination of who he is. Whereas in this movie, in Hillbilly Elegy, we're constantly seeing the way the women in his life bail him out, and he's just an ungrateful jerk.
I mean, that's really it, Yeah. I mean, we get a few more charming moments from Mama of course, like her Terminator moment, which is, I guess I'll be nice and say campy, but because it's where she's watching the Terminator on TV and she's like, "Hasta la vista, baby," and pulls out her finger guns, which I do find like oddly charming and specific in a way that's like, well, that is clearly something that really did probably happen with Mama, the real Mama.
Yep.
But yeah, the whole thing of her telling him like, everyone in this world is one of three kinds: good Terminator, bad Terminator, and neutral.
Yeah, who knew there were neutral Terminators?
I still don't entirely understand this metaphor or monologue, because as she goes on to explain, she had to learn to be a good Terminator, which is like, not to question Mama, but in Terminator 2, he was like programmed to be good, essentially. So that doesn't entirely hold up for me. Like, it was kind of his programming to be good, quote unquote, but she's suggesting she had to like learn to be that. Also, what actually is a neutral Terminator, just on a fundamental level? I need to know that.
Yeah, I have so many questions about that.
Yeah, it's just very clunky to me.
Yeah.
And Glenn is trying her best. Lord knows. She's trying to make this land. But I just cannot help but laugh at this every time I see it or think about it. It's unfortunately one of the lasting sort of quotes of this movie for as many people. You know, this is not like a super talked about movie as much today, but like whenever people talk about it, they always think about this Terminator speech, which for me kind of exemplifies the empty platitudes and like the surface level sort of like examination of life lessons and such that
Yeah.
show why it's just not what it's trying to be.
Yeah. When this is your biggest quote that you can remember from like specifically from the movie, then it really
Mm-hmm.
is not, it's not a successful script about, you know, this inspirational story. It's just not.
Yeah, it's again like Glenn tries her best, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone could have saved something like that.
Oh,
So
absolutely not. Like that is 100%
yeah.
just terrible writing. And yeah, I mean, I think she does her best, but there's nothing that nobody could have done that well.
Yeah. I mean, one other kind of good scene for her, you could say good, I'm saying showcase in a sense. Showcase scene of when JD has to get this graphing calculator for school and he decides to try and steal it from Radio Shack and gets busted. And Mama really lays into him in the car. Is basically like, you know, you have to get your shit together. Like, your friends suck. You're not trying at school. You need to apply yourself to like give yourself a chance in life. And even when he tries to argue, like, hey, like, my mom was top of her class and look at her now, she's like, you know, you still have to try and make a life for yourself. And she just tells him he has to decide if he wants to be somebody. I would say definitely her biggest Oscar baity scene, you could say, in the film. Just in the way it's filmed, even, and the way it's written, you can almost sense in like how it's timed that it's engineered to be like a strong clip for her. But she still performs it, I think, with a fierceness and just that look in her eye. Like there's such a sharpness in the way she looks at him in a way that's like, you are going to remember this for the rest of your life, is kind of the
Yeah.
vibe she's giving,
Yeah, that
you
whole
know?
scene, because then, you know, he's just stolen the calculator and gotten in trouble. She got called, she goes in, she ends up buying the calculator, which he didn't know she did. And
Yeah.
she hands it to him in the bag. They have this conversation. He throws it out the window because he's a little shit. And
Mm-hmm.
she stops the car, and then and so her monologuing is continuing, her life lessons are continuing, and she tells him like get out and get the calculator or don't bother getting back in the car. And I think with other actresses that whole thing could have just felt really silly, but there
Mm-hmm.
is something about the way Glenn performs it that you really believe her. You really believe
Yeah.
that fierceness and that like I'm done with you. I'm done putting up with this. You're not going to be like your mother if I have anything to say about it. And I think that she really makes it believable.
Yeah. And I mean, I hesitate to praise the screenplay too much, obviously, because there's just so many flaws here. But I think in that sense, Mama is, for me, the most well-defined character in the film
Mm-hmm.
because, and probably helps that Glenn is performing her with some respect, is that like you can sense she knows that she screwed up with Bev, and now she kind of has learned lessons from that herself and wants to rewrite her wrongs in a sense with JD.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can respond to it on that level at least. But, you know, there's also, again, to speak to like some of her clunkier lines that she has to deliver, is when there's another scene earlier in the film where her husband has died and they're going off in their limo to the funeral and they're noticing all the people in town with their hats off and sort of paying respects. And JD asks her why they're doing that. And she's like, because we're hill people, honey. We respect our dead. Which, oddly enough, even as corny as that is, like it does ring true just in the way that she inhabits all of that, kind of like as her life philosophy in a sense. And there was something about that scene in what she was physically doing that struck me, just in how she even like to get technical with it, like positions her mouth and her jaw. And there is that sort of intangible grandmother quality that I even remember from my own grandmother too, like this kind of like prideful sort of old school thing that's, I guess, hard to explain, but like you know it when you see it,
Yeah.
I suppose. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And well, and you get the sense that I mean, she's looking out the window, she's seeing all these people, but she's not really seeing them because she's also caught up in her grief. And
Yeah.
and I think that that's also an interesting choice. It's also one of the only scenes where we get any real connection with the community.
Yeah,
He's
that too.
constantly in town. He's constantly like we see people out and about and like his mother at work and whatever, but this is the only scene where we have any real idea of the community coming together or the fact that everybody does feel like they're all part of one, one group. They're all hill people, and that's the only time we get
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for Glenn, it is a very successful performance in the middle of a movie that is really struggling to figure out what it's trying to do. She is the one who is kind of helping to keep it afloat and guide what we're kind of supposed to learn from this, because otherwise I do think, just to go back to it a little bit, I think a lot of the stuff with Bev just does not work,
Yeah.
quite frankly. And it just really is demonizing her over and over again and just makes her into this colossal screw up without a whole lot of sympathy all that much, but behind a few occasional sympathetic notes. But like for the most part, it's just, she's in these circumstances of like, she's addicted to drugs and she's so volatile, and every conversation she has with people escalates into a fight. It's just so overdone and repetitive, I think, which, you could say obviously being in the cycle of addiction leads to repetitive conversations and people repeating the same behaviors. And by all accounts, she was a volatile person, so it's not totally like obscuring who she really was. But I just feel like the film rarely even gives her the space or even the empathy to show the real pain that she's experiencing and what led her down this path. And it just reduces Amy to just these series of screaming fights and wigging out and like occasional moments of warmth, like when she takes JD to like the card store one time and they're bonding. But like she just becomes a real caricature in a way that, even in the way Amy plays it, I just don't find authentic. And I feel like that really does sink the movie whenever we just keep belaboring the point about how bad of a mom she is.
Yeah, because the thing is, we only really see her through JD's eyes, and
Yeah.
he clearly just is frustrated with his mom and doesn't see her as a whole person, and which is understandable given the circumstances, but that's where it's like we see we see how he sees everybody in this film, and I think that there needed to be a little bit less attachment. I think that might have helped, because we do need to see Amy getting the opportunity to have something more, to not just constantly be this obstacle, this barrier for him, and this constant source of frustration and embarrassment and holding him back. We also, with his sister Lindsay, who is Haley Bennett, like this is one of the things that's interesting when you, like I said, when you go back and read some of the reviews from when this came out, and people are praising the strong women at the center of his story, and I'm just like, well, are they though? I think that there are some interesting things about each of these performances, but again, I think that because we're only really experiencing them through JD's eyes, Lindsay has been dealing with all this. She's got kids, she's got a husband, she's the one that's still home. And there's just this sense of like, well, I just can't deal with it anymore. I need you to give up all the things that you've been working toward to come home and rescue me from this deal, this situation with mom, and max out your credit cards because I just can't, it's baffling to watch that and to just see yet another opportunity where we could have seen more of this being a family situation and a family conversation, family problem to solve together, and instead it's JD being having to give up his opportunities or potentially give them up to come back and rescue his family.
Yeah. I mean, this is making me think of something I've referred to before on the show. I think possibly even with you when I was on the 2017 Best Actress episode talking about Lady Bird, where like Greta Gerwig just has such a strong sense of character that you can see each and every one of her characters as individual people who have their own wants and needs, and you could center the story around all of them because they all just feel so well defined and living their own lives. And then kind of the flip side of that is when you see a weaker screenplay that just shows one person and everyone in their life revolves around them and they barely seem to have individual lives of their own. And that's what I think is here present, because you can say there are such strong women in this movie, but they all are just defined by their relationship to him. And they might as well disappear off the face of the earth when they're not in a scene.
Yeah.
Because it's all just about him.
Yeah. I think Lady Bird is a really good comparison too, because that's also, there's such a strong sense of place in that film, and Sacramento becomes another character in that movie. And the way that he talks about where he's from in Hillbilly Elegy, Middletown, Ohio should feel like another character, and it just doesn't.
No. It's tough. Did you want to talk any about the sort of current day 2011 scenes, which we haven't talked about at all? Because for me, watching those, I was just like, we could have skipped all of this.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that is just the way that it's staged and probably the way that it's performed, because, he goes to this dinner, he's uncomfortable. But the thing is that at this point, he's already been in New Haven for a few years. So this shouldn't be...
Doesn't know what fork to use.
Right. And this shouldn't be the first time he's ever dealt with that. And then he has to quick call Usha, who's like, make the B and the D with your hands, which is a great trick, by the way. Even though I know what forks to use and where the glass is, sometimes I forget. And so I do that and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is my glass. All right, cool. Just saying. But it went on for so long. And then there's that moment where one of the partners from this law firm makes a comment about hillbillies or rednecks. And JD says, we don't use that term. And he's very offended by the use of the term redneck when someone else is saying it in obviously a disparaging way. And I think that there could have been something really good there, but you also can't separate the fact that this is a movie about JD Vance, who has done everything he can to not be this person and to fit in with all those partners at that table and to throw all the people he grew up with under the bus, and in a and like pushing that narrative of like immigrants coming in and eating dogs and cats and like all the things that he's done to make Ohio just look like just the bottom of the barrel, just this horrible place. And so to know that that's who he is in real life, and granted, we didn't know all of that about him back when this movie came out, but
there were hints, I would
say. There were, yeah. And,
and
it just really, watching it now just makes it that much more glaring of like, wait, I'm supposed to have some sympathy for this fish out of water kid, but he's an asshole and I do not feel anything for him.
Not at all. Yeah. Also, for what it's worth, to go back to the fork thing, why not just observe what the other people at the table are doing and what fork they're using? I mean, I'm just saying, like, like, why do we need to have your girlfriend come rescue you?
Right.
Figure out what fork to use.
Well, because you have to give Frida Pinto something to do, she needs to constantly be there to answer the phone and be the girlfriend on the phone helping him out.
It really is a phone call performance from Frida Pinto.
100%.
Once a star of a Best Picture winning film, Slumdog Millionaire, now reduced to girlfriend on the phone.
Yep.
Yeah, it's rough what they do to Frida Pinto here.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But it does, like, all of that kind of exemplifies the issues of the movie and how it just takes the easy way out whenever it can, when they easily could have tackled that theme in a more genuine way of like that sort of even that casual classism that you mentioned of the lawyer calling these people from his hometown rednecks, and just kind of expand upon that a little bit. But, again, it's just so flat and ultimately just not even what he truly believes or feels. So, Yeah, and I just feel like, again, everything in the 2011 storyline just feels like it doesn't work at all. Like I felt like I would get annoyed whenever it would cut back to 2011 because I felt like it just ruins the momentum that we were going towards. And I just wonder how it would have played if it were just in chronological order, even rather than bouncing back and forth. I feel like it could add some momentum of the idea of like we're building towards him wanting to break the cycle and get out, but we've already seen that he did because it's like the first scene of the movie. And
Right.
so also the whole invented plot line, which did not happen in real life, where he's rushing home to take care of his family in 2011 while also having like this interview scheduled the next day. It's all just an invention, and that doesn't need to even be there if the conclusion is just that he got out and did make a name for himself. So I just don't know what we're doing with that.
And I think that's the biggest problem is that it is all invented and it's trying to set up some sort of, more empathy for this guy of like, listen, he's been dealing with this since he was a little kid. He even got out of town and has gone and he's building a life for himself. He did the Marines. Now he's in law school and he's about to have a big career. Because if you get a degree from Yale Law School, you can work anywhere you want pretty much.
Yep.
And yet he's still being pulled back to deal with all this stuff from his, these things that have, that are still constantly there. And it just feels like this attempt to valorize him in a way that he doesn't deserve and is completely unnecessary.
It is, and it just is unearned.
Yeah.
And I feel like it would add momentum to whether JD really can break it if we're seeing an older JD eventually and his mom still having these issues. I think that would have extra weight to it, but I just don't really feel that the way it's structured personally. Also, another random thing I thought on this rewatch is like, not that I needed it, but it is fascinating that it completely glosses over his time with the Marines. Like, it's only like when he's on the phone with Usha, his girlfriend, like on his way back to New Haven,
Yeah.
that he tells her a little bit about being in boot camp. But like,
Yeah.
that's like a solid section of his life that's just completely glossed over, that felt like it maybe could have shaped him even more to some degree and given him some discipline or whatever. I don't know.
It
That,
paid for him to
yeah,
go to
nothing.
College.
There's that.
That's
Yeah. I
that
guess
was my
that's
biggest takeaway from his time in the Marines was that it paid for his college.
that was its use, I guess.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
It's just very strange that it's just like, again, like a full chunk of his life. Like, yeah.
Right. A chunk that he's supposedly so proud of and loves to, he loves to be able to say that he was in the Marines. A lot of people in some of our highest offices have not done that. But yeah, how did it affect you, JD? How did that help you become the person that you are now?
Wouldn't know a thing from this movie.
Nope.
So, did you have any other stray observations on the movie
Oh my gosh.
you wanted to mention?
The awkward, completely unnecessary montage. It's just,
which one was that?
The one where actually it shows him going to boot camp and getting his head shaved, but it's like these flashbacks of like little snippets of his, like things that we've seen in the movie. These aren't even other, tidbits, but like the conversation with Mama and dealing with his mom, and then we see him going into boot camp, and it's like, oh, look at him,
Yeah.
So bad.
So stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, I just hate how glossy, and I don't know, it just seems so, it has that sheen to it that just is so artificial, that it's such a mismatch for the material. But,
the scene where he's checking his mom into rehab when she decides not to go after he's just put all this money on his credit cards. But I was just like, how many credit cards does he have? And why are they not maxed out?
Great question.
Like, I don't understand this either.
Yeah, and also just the tone of that whole scene is just so weird and cheap to me. Like, and really, that's a great example of the film really flattening a very complex situation where she doesn't have insurance, she let it lapse. So
she lost her job.
Feels like we're kind of exactly. I don't know. It just gives me an icky feeling.
Yeah.
And same thing with like the whole, Bev roller skating in the halls. That feels like it's weirdly played for laughs, even though she's like having a mental breakdown. I don't know.
Hmm.
Lots of interesting choices here. But
Interesting is a very kind word.
yeah, I'd say 0 out of 10. Do not recommend, except to watch Glenn doing some decent work.
Yeah, yeah. But you have to put
You
up
know,
with 2 hours of just
yeah,
nonsense to get that. So,
of JD Vance propaganda, which no one is really in the mood for. Well,
right.
maybe some people are, but I don't want to associate with them.
No, I do have to say though,
So,
too, just on the subject of this being JD Vance propaganda, it's interesting because at the
mm-hmm.
time that this movie was made, like he was still very much like when his book came out and the whole 2016 came out, he was super anti-Trump
Yes, he
and
was.
I think he called him a Nazi, in fact. But
Hmm.
this is one of the this is just another thing about this movie is that it could have taken some time to delve into. I know Ron Howard didn't want to make this a political thing, but it is a political story. This is about a guy, which I know in 2020 he was not we didn't know he was the future vice president, but he certainly was starting to become more of a figure, more of a presence in national politics. And I think that there needed to be some engagement with that idea. And there are ways to do it without being super overt, and I know that they kind of sprinkle in, oh, I want to watch, who was he watching on TV?
Al Gore.
Al Gore. Yeah, he wanted to watch
Yeah.
Al Gore, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like there's little bits of that, but it's none of it is delved into deeply, and there's not a big sense that he cares at all about politics, and you could have
No.
put some of that in there. And how the again with how the community that he's raised in, the family that he's raised in, how their politics shaped him, and there's nothing of that, no hint of that.
Yeah. There's not even a hint that he would want to write this story,
Right. Yeah.
which he ultimately does in 2016,
Yeah.
5 years after. Yeah. So, but I did want to just mention Glenn herself has spoken out about JD Vance in the years since. So she did have a few fun and interesting quotes about him, starting in about 2024, of course, when JD has become senator of Ohio and then became vice presidential candidate and then vice president. She said at one point, "You only hope that people in our government have a moral backbone and that they don't say one thing and then say something that's 150 degrees different," which is in reference to, as you mentioned, JD completely turning and supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah.
She's mentioned stuff about the childless cat ladies thing that JD said, posting a photo of her own cat, Eve, where she said Eve would have left a bleeding mouse head in the bed of anyone who criticized any kind of lady with a cat.
One of my cats is currently sleeping on my foot underneath my desk right now.
There we have it.
Yep.
Yes. And she also said on The View at one point, "I don't know what happened," in reference to JD Vance, and said, "Power is," I love this quote. She said, "Power is probably the biggest aphrodisiac for a human being."
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
And I think that that is really a very good summation of what we see right now in the Republican Party.
exactly that.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just a very tricky thing, I think, probably is for Ron Howard and Amy Adams and for Glenn and other people who are, Glenn is a very vocal Democrat and people involved with this. It's always so tricky when they get to the subject of this because they have to kind of ride this line of respecting the work that they did and their peers did in the film, but also showing that they do have a perspective on this all these years later. And so anyway, the people
Yeah.
have been a little like Ron Howard has kind of played at both sides when he's talked about this that people have discussed, which I don't love, but at the very least, even if I'm a little bit regretful that Glenn was ultimately involved in this movie to some degree, I do take some solace in that like she knows what he
Yeah.
became.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the interesting thing of of how can you be in a movie about this person, and whenever there's a controversial figure and people make a movie about that person, anybody who's
Mhm.
involved in it is going to automatically be questioned. Their motivations are going to be questioned and why they would agree to sign up for something like that. And I have to say, at least this wasn't made by like Angel Studios, like
That's true.
this there is some messiness to the story, and JD isn't just presented as this perfect, never did anything wrong kid, like, whereas if it were made by that studio, it probably would have been much even shinier
That's a
than
fair
what
point.
what Ron Howard did. And I do think that I do think that someone like Glenn Close, for her, ultimately, it's a job. When you sign up
Yeah.
for a movie, it's a job, and it looked to her like an interesting challenge. And so I
Hmm.
don't, I don't blame anybody who decided to be part of this, especially like if they made this
Sure.
movie now, I would have more questions about agreeing to do it. But doing this 8 years, 7, 8 years ago, I could see it just being something that looked like,
Yeah.
something fun to do, like sink your teeth into something new.
That's very true. I definitely would give her and the others more grace because of that. It's just, again, in retrospect, it just obviously looks bad
Yeah, yeah.
based on how things ultimately went. But yeah, it's a very complicated issue. But unless we had anything else on Hillbilly Elegy or JD Vance or the state of national politics, we can move on to the release.
I just still can't get over the dogs and cats thing.
Yeah.
And like to say that about the place that he grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And and then to
And then being
yeah,
elected.
yeah. I just I my brain just I will never understand that at all. And the
Yeah.
disdain that he has for where he's from, and yet trying to use that as like, oh, look, see, I understand the people because I'm from there. I don't want to have anything to do with y'all, but I get
Right.
you. Like I don't
It's so
understand him.
condescending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then it's like,
And
then you look at Mama, and it's like you were raised by this woman that definitely taught you better.
yep. Oh yeah. I would love to know Mama's thoughts
Oh
if she
yes.
were still around. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and there is I should note, just dating back to 2016, there have been critics of the book from people of Appalachia and
Yes.
the rural communities there, very much sort of disowning the message that JD has put across, which I feel is just getting worse.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's like you mentioned at the beginning of this, was, the way that he's just looked down on poor people, on
yeah.
drug addicts, without really considering why they are in this cycle, and the fact
Right.
that they, like, especially through the coal belts, and these mining communities, places that's kind of where these towns emerged, and then the way that corporate America used them and abused them and then turned their backs on them. And he just doesn't care about that. He's not
No.
interested in that kind of reflection.
No. Yeah. And I mean, not to put everything on him, I do think like Ron Howard or Vanessa Taylor could have added scenes that
Mm-hmm.
consider those things. Like, it's not just like they have to be totally, have full fidelity to JD's
Right.
perspective and voice. Like, they could have contextualized things a little more, even just with visuals. Like, it doesn't even have to be big speeches like
Yeah.
the film has all throughout. We can actually see the people, as you mentioned. Like, we only get a few glances at the community.
Yeah.
So,
When you make a movie that is just very safe, it ultimately doesn't really tell us anything.
right. So, to what end is what I say about this
Exactly.
movie. All right, well, let's talk about the release of Hillbilly Elegy. So, as I mentioned earlier, Netflix distributed the film, but knew that they wanted to push it for Oscars, so they gave it their classic limited theatrical release on November 11th, 2020. Keep in mind, we were still in the COVID pandemic at the time, so I don't know how many people actually saw this in theaters, but I'd wager not that many. It then came to the Netflix platform on November 24th, 2020. Critics were negative on the film, with a lot of complaints about it just kind of feeling like a bland family drama. there were critiques of the film itself even existing, and even with how sanitized it ultimately was, there was even some thought about it being harmful in its depiction of the poor working class. General feeling of it feeling like awards bait, especially for Amy and Glenn, two actresses, as we know, who by this point were known for being perpetual Oscar bridesmaids. So there was a very cynical perspective, I think, on that narrative. But there was a decent amount of praise for Glenn's performance, people feeling like she was best in show and one of the only elements to kind of escape unscathed. And despite all those critical lashings, Glenn did, in fact, earn some awards nominations from Critics' Choice, which is funny because critics hated the movie. But that's a whole other, tangent we could go down, but probably not for this episode. Golden Globes nominated her, SAG nominated her, AARP, of course. And then she landed an Oscar nomination in the end, which is her 8th and most recent nomination. And the film also scored a nomination for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, which we didn't talk too much about her transformation, but it really is like quite striking when you see her in this movie. And, not a bad job in the makeup department, but any thoughts on why the film was received rather poorly, but also eventually was still able to get those nominations?
Well, first of all, I have to say I forgot that this was released around Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And Thanksgiving during COVID when everybody was just home watching TV. And so I think that's interesting. But yeah, I think because of the fact that Glenn is the standout here, I think she is easy and such a likable person. I think it's easy to separate her from the mess of the movie. And so I can see how that got some attention. And like around that time with the Oscars too, there just weren't a lot of choices either. So because a lot of movies got canceled that year, there was just a lot of weird stuff happening. So
a lot going on.
Yeah. But the hair and makeup though too, I do think is really, really good. It's one of those where you put out pictures, the first look photos, and say Glenn is unrecognizable, and you're like, well, no, I can still see her, but
very much, yeah.
But she is a beautiful woman, and she's very different looking in the makeup that they put her in for this, and I think the fact that she's willing to embody this, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, just to start with the reaction too, I think we could say for better or for worse that the knives were out for this movie from early on, with critics, which I obviously get from a political perspective that there was some thought that this would maybe just be like this right-wing polemic sort of rallying cry type of thing. And I do remember a lot of criticism, I guess we could say from our little corner of like left-wing film Twitter, that there was some criticism of like Ron Howard and especially towards Amy and Glenn for even doing the movie at all, but I think critics were largely fair in assessing the film for what it was, in that it was just kind of a safe melodrama that didn't really engage with any interesting ideas. And I think with Glenn and her going on to get those nominations, I think it was a very impressive transformation, unlike much of anything she'd done in the past. And I also think it appealed to the voting bloc of the Academy that has more of an appreciation for the safer middle-brow films with big performances. Thinking of something like a Bombshell or Naiad or Song Sung Blue this past year. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Which is, it's just kind of like a very easy screener to pop in, and you get these very showy performances.
Yeah.
And it just kind of appeals to people, I guess, in that way.
Yeah. Especially when you just want to watch something kind of light and you don't want to have to think too critically about it. Certain movies just fit that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I think there was some residual love for Glenn too after The Wife that she kind of benefited from. And I did think for a hot second, I don't know about you, but because of how showy and traditional the role was, that could she just win the Oscar? Like, is that where we're heading? I don't know. I mean, like after the critics kind of completely lambasted it, I don't know if I felt that as much, but just again, like those first photos we got of her and her having that, the sort of thought in mind of her losing so prominently recently, I felt like could just be a narrative for her, you know?
And I think if it had been a better movie, she would have won.
That is what I was going to ask as well. So I'm glad we're on the same page on that. I really do think, like, if the movie were better, if this was even just like a fictional family drama, you know, and not about JD Vance, and she just had this same performance, I think people would have been kinder and she could have had a narrative. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is she lost to Yoo Jun-yoon for
Yes.
Minari, who also plays a grandma
Mm-hmm.
in the South
Yes.
in
Mm-hmm.
a period piece. Like, but
Right.
that's a really tender, beautiful movie that doesn't, you know,
Judge its characters. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Feels more authentic.
Hmm.
Like, you know, we could go down the list of
Yeah,
everything that movie does right that Hillbilly Elegy does wrong.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I do remember like the messiness of that supporting actress race that year too, where you did have Yoo Jung-yoon for Minari, who like did enough voters. Were they going to get behind her for someone who was kind of unknown in America, despite being a legend in Korea? We had like Maria Bakalova for the Borat sequel, who was
Yep.
somehow like a strong contender, you know?
It's because of the
And
Rudy Giuliani scene. I will go to my grave believing
yeah,
that.
I mean, that's almost definitely true. Yeah. And Amanda Seyfried had kind of a rocky run for Mank that's like, I don't know if she was ever really in win contention. And then Olivia Colman, you know, I don't know if she fully had enough heat to win a second Oscar so soon after her first. So it did feel like Glenn had a shot, but she ultimately didn't win anything. And I think it was far less nerve wracking for her going to that year's Oscars compared to the ceremony 2 years before.
Question for you though. What would you have done if Olivia Colman had won that one too?
I would be politely happy for her. It would have hurt less than the wife one. I'll say that.
Yeah.
You know. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I do not hate Olivia Colman. I
Oh
understand the
no, she's
circumstances
wonderful.
have led people to believe that she is like my enemy, but she's really not. She's a lovely lady. She's
Yeah.
kooky. She's fun. I'm glad she's now a leading lady star. So just putting that out there for folks to not misconstrue anything.
Yes, yes. But I will say too that I really, really, really need Glenn to get nominated again because this cannot be her final nomination.
No,
No.
I know. No, I rebuke this.
Yes.
Yes.
We're speaking into the universe that she will be nominated again.
Yes. I mean, she continues to work in film. She's in a film that has a lot of Oscar buzz right now called La Bola Negra that's coming out soon. And I don't know if she'll be nominated for that because it's a small role, but like, you know, she's on people's radars in a good way and working with, okay, I'll say better directors than she had been working with in the past. She's
Hmm.
on the right track, working with Ryan Johnson and working with the Javis here. And so, anyway,
Yes.
I did just briefly want to mention before we get out of here what I think was really she was a highlight of that year's Oscars, as you may recall, which were the pandemic Oscars. They were
They
held in
were.
Union Train Station, and it
Hmm.
was rather depressing and full of, I would say, unforgivable producer choices from Steven Soderbergh and company, who were like presenting Best Director in the first hour and doing
Hmm.
Best Actor and Best Actress after picture. So much to be said about
Trying to
that.
force a
But
moment and it blew up in their faces.
they tried it.
Yep.
They tried it, is all I'll say. But one of the highlights was this one segment with Lil Rel Howery where he went around with the mic and spoke to various celebrities about like music and stuff.
I
And
forgot about this.
yes, he did this amazing bit with Glenn where she quickly is recognizing this rap song being played as Da Butt from the movie School Days. And they play the song and she gets up and she starts twerking in
Hmm.
her gorgeous blue dress. I mean, it was a moment to remember, I'll say.
Amazing. Amazing. You
Yes.
should have
And
given
I
her
think
an award for that.
despite her not winning the Oscar there, she was one of the true winners of the night,
Yeah,
I'll
she won
say.
the Oscars, even if she didn't win
Yes,
an
the
Oscar.
Oscars. There we go. Beautifully said. Yes. So, again, just in hindsight, it's for the best that she did not win for Hillbilly Elegy. It's one of the only times in my awards watching lifetime that Glenn was nominated for something, and I'm like, It's okay if she doesn't win. It's fine. I don't need this to, So
yeah, we don't need that to be her Oscar.
I think it all worked out in the end, and I'm so happy for Yo Jung Yoon because I adore that performance.
Yes,
yes. All right, well, I think it's time to get to our last segment, where we're going to rate Glenn's performance on a very specific scale. So would you say her performance as Mama, is she ready for her close-up? Is it low Glennergy? Is it close but no cigar? Is she serving in silence, which is delivering a great supporting performance? Or Glennicent, which means she's good, but the project is not so good?
Yeah, I'm going with that one.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. I before rewatching it this week, I probably would have gone, no, low Glennergy. But rewatching what she did and really focusing on her performance, I'm like, no, you know what? She actually is doing some really good things here. It's just the film can't keep up with her.
Yep. I completely agree. This is a Glennicent through and through. This is a textbook definition of Glennicent. I think she's putting in very good work in a film that isn't anywhere near her level.
Yeah.
And it really does, like, to reiterate, annoy me that, like, just again, speaking stupid Oscar terms, like, if it wasn't specifically Hillbilly Elegy and she was just giving this performance in a family drama, maybe if it was written and directed with a little bit more authenticity and had better reviews, I do think this could have easily been her Oscar ticket, like, pretty easily.
Yeah.
It's just a shame about the rest of it, as they say. So
agree.
Yeah, well, Karen, this was such a fun and fascinating journey back into Hillbilly Elegy. I couldn't have asked for a better person to talk about this movie with, oddly enough. I think we really, I guess you could say, did it justice.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. But thank you so much. And where can people find more of you on the internet?
Well, you can find my written work at awardswatch.com, and my podcasts are Citizen Dame Pod and The Watch and Talk. And then I am on social media everywhere at Karen M. Peterson.
Not as much Twitter anymore.
No, not Twitter.
Yeah,
I went private on Twitter and then I don't even look at it anymore. But Blue Sky and Letterboxd and Instagram.
I'm so happy for you. I really am.
It's the
piece
best.
that you know.
Yeah, I forget that certain people even exist now.
God,
it's
what I would give. Yes. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobsen on Twitter, I guess, if you want, or Instagram, or just Kevin Jacobsen, no underscore on Blue Sky. You can listen to my Oscar-themed podcast, And the Runner-Up Is, for coverage of every single Best Actress race. That's And the Runner-Up Is on all platforms. You can also go to patreon.com/And the Runner-Up Is for early access to these episodes and bonus episodes of And the Runner-Up Is, such as my A Woman Robbed series, which Karen has been so nice to be on as well, talking about some old Hollywood gals. And to keep up with the world according to Glenn on social, follow the Glenn Pod. Rate, review, and follow on all platforms. And with that, I'll bid you all adieu.